my name is Fredrik Tham. I'm the co-founder and the CTO of Enqlare. And we are a SaaS platform for the ocean bulk shipping industry. And these are the topics I want to cover today. First, a little bit of an introduction to Enqlare, so you know who it is that is up here talking, and the background and sort of the industry that we operate in. Why we went low-code, what is required to make it work, and punching above our weight class. And I'll just say this straight away, these are going to be some top lines. This is not going to be a complete coverage of all the small nuts and bolts that is required to go into these topics, because they're big topics. But to start off with, as I said, it's a SaaS platform for bulk shipping and the global bulk shipping industry. We are a mixture of shipping professionals and software engineers. We sit actually just a couple of blocks from here. We have clients on all continents, not Antarctica. And this is quite sort of stands out, I think. Because if you look at most companies, they'll say, yeah, we're international, yes, we're global. But they will say, yeah, well, our clients are actually in Western Europe, and we have a couple in the US. We are in Hobart, Tasmania, we're in Japan, we're in China. We are in Baffin Island, that I will show you a picture on soon, that is 65 degrees north. That's north, that's ice locked. So that does put some requirements on your uptimes and when your release windows are. I'll assure you that. We travel a lot on Zoom and Team. And what we do, and this is a little bit of a slogan, Enqlare builds solution for the maritime industry to provide insight, collaboration, and automation. And I want to stay a little bit on this one, because as software providers, I think we're very good at writing these slogans and coming up with things that sounds really good, but what does it actually really mean? And to give a very concrete example, if you're a port agent and you receive 50,000 invoices per year, if you can save 2 minutes per invoice, that adds up to a lot of hours. And that is hours that you can spend on doing more business. If you are a ship broker and you receive thousands of emails per day, and you can actually swift through those emails and act upon those that are needed to act upon, now you can do more business. So these are the kind of things that I think are the real hard values that we have to deliver as a product and as a platform. But before we go more into the Mendix story, I want to talk a little bit about shipping, because there is some fun things here that is not related to IT. Shipping is one of the oldest industries in the world. Yeah, I think most of us in here, without knowing your industries, I don't think any of our industries has been around for more, maybe 50 years, 100 if you're in automotive. Shipping has been hundreds of years. We've been shipping cargo around the world for hundreds of years. And if you talk to a shipping company, they'll talk about a charter party. That's the contract to move something from A to B. And they'll have clauses in there about rats that was written in 1938. So it is truly old. And to give you a little bit the shipping, when I talk about shipping, a lot of people start thinking about trucks, or they think about container ships, usually coming into a port that is close to a city. Bulk shipping is about shipping typically the commodities. So in this case here, it's about 200,000 tons of iron ore. Think about that number for a second and try to translate that into cars. At 2 tons per car, it's 100,000 cars. It's a lot of stuff that goes into a boat like this. And it's complex. I mean, you see the size of this one. This vessel loads at 60,000 metric tons per day. If you load it all into one of those bucket holes, the vessel is going to crack in the middle. If that vessel cracks in the middle, this has happened, that port shuts down. That mine shuts down. And I'm saying this to a little bit give the perspective, because we as IT people, we think about, well, I need to have the backup running, or this is great, we can save you 2 minutes, per invoice that you scan. That's what they are thinking about. And you see here on the map, and if you don't recognize, this is Greenland. It's going north of Greenland. That's ice locked for 9 months of the year. So for about 2 to 3 months, they have to get all the production out. If they don't, you can't sell it for another year. So if we save, again, a little bit of money on scanning some invoices, that's a tough one. We have to deliver that. Shipping, as I said, is really old school in many ways. And in some ways, it was very quick to adopt new technologies. Telex, they were super quick on this. And you see here it says Shink. Load rate, 60,000 metric tons per day, Shink, in capital letters. Sundays, holidays included. When you had Telex, you paid per letter. And Telex was only in capital letters. It still is. Everyone in shipping talks about Shink. No one says Sundays, holidays included. So that history sits there when you work in shipping, which is a lot of fun, but sometimes a bit frustrating too, to be honest. So this is really the world that we are working in. But now I'll try to go on to sort of the main topic of the day, low code and Mendix. And so why did we go low code? And when I say we, this is really 2 guys with a laptop each and a PowerPoint and an idea. Actually, only 2 blocks from here in a shared office center about 7 years ago. We had an idea, we had a vision to build a platform for this industry. And when you're 2 guys, these promises, and I tell you budgets, they exist, but they're not very big. But these promises are really appealing, but I got enough gray hair to be a little bit skeptical when I see promises like this. If you look at the first one, we already heard about this today, 5 to 10 times faster development. I actually gave this a green light. Sorry, there it is. And what we did was that we looked at 4 different projects that had built, it was actually a financial platform, so nothing related to shipping. And we were able to meet and interview those, and these numbers actually came out true. And the size of these projects for the traditional development were in the 10 to 12 million krona range, and the Mendix build platform was in about 1.5 million kronas. So sizable projects, enough size to sort of find complexities and get stuck. Next one, well, we learned this as we went along. You need developers. I'm going to talk more about that. But next one, where do I click? I got to click a lot of times here. It's a complete package. I think this is an important one. I'm probably going to come back to it. I don't think about which version of the database that we're running. Previously before Mendix, if I worked often as a project manager for IT projects, and maybe it was a company standard, or someone said, well, we're going to build this in .NET, and you thought you were going to start a project. And then first thing that happens is that a developer raises a hand and says, which version control system are we going to use? And then the first 3 weeks about your development project is about figuring that out, because apparently there's no standard in the company for the versioning control system. So I think it brings a lot of simplicity in the sense that there's a lot of things that you don't have to think about. It just works. Next one, pre-made Lego bits but extendable. I had this one as a green one, but my developer said, Fredrik, that's not completely true. There are some things that we cannot extend completely as we would like. But I'd say this: if you're thinking about this as a no to Mendix, think about more about like, okay, what are the potential limitations that I might get from working with this tool? And if it is the last 3% that you want, is that the last 3% that is going to bring a lot of value to you? Maybe not. But as been said before, not every tool is great at everything. Okay, what is required to make this work? And again, these are my opinions, and I'm not gonna. I don't think this is a complete picture, but this is one of the claims of Mendix business developers, and I will say yes, you can. If you can master Excel, power user, then you can build Mendix apps. You can build big apps. You can build responsive apps. You can cover a lot of very complex scenarios. But what that actually translates into is that you're very quickly going to get to the hard stuff. And this is good because we want to get to the hard stuff quickly. But when we get there, then we need professional developers that actually knows coding and the complexities of writing a bigger application. Hard stuff, I'll evolve this. Hard for a business developer is my sort of short version. But before going into more what the hard stuff is, one thing that I find is really good is if I come to a client and they're thinking about sort of adopting our solution or worse, a competitor solution, they say, well, we're actually operating everything in Excel. Really, everything? Yes, we operate everything in Excel. And what happens is that they share that Excel sheet with us, and these are massive Excel sheets sometimes. And that's the best requirement specification you can get as a professional developer. Because you've had that business user think about every single cell in that Excel sheet. And to me, that's really the most complete requirement specification I can get, because I can sit there and what actually do you mean with this cell? So I haven't seen this in the world of Mendix, but I would guess that there's a similar case for if you have business developers actually throwing together all the cells, if you want to, formulas here. That's a very good foundation for when you want to get over here to the hard stuff. Okay, hard stuff. Let's look at some examples. What is actually hard stuff? As a business user, I want this to be updated all the time, real time, preferably. No changing. I'm very important. Well, what happens then is that someone finds this setting in the Mendix modeler. It's on a data grid. A data grid is, you think about a table of data, and you can actually go in there and set the refresh rate to 1 second. I call it the setting of death. Because you might throw in a couple of these data grids into one page. This is going to work fantastically on your local machine when you develop. It's likely also going to work fantastic in your test environment. But suddenly you get into production and you have a few hundred users looking at this page, which is now 4 times per second querying the database on the same table. And then on the same table, someone wants to do a transaction. The loads go up very quickly. And there are other ways that you can achieve this in Mendix, so don't worry. But there are other better ways. So as in, like, when you get that, that's when it starts to get hard. Next user story. As a UX designer, I want that search field to be above the tabs, not below. They are below in the standard tab container in Mendix. This is the difference, 138 versus 0 points. If you really need it above, yeah, it's fine, but it's going to cost you 138 points and you're going to need a developer to do it. Transactional control must be guaranteed. This is a requirement from our compliance department. Well, when we talk about transaction control, just to sort of refresh everyone, That means you can't withdraw the same amount of money twice from that bank account. It can only happen once. Well, okay, there's something about all of this stuff, the deadlocks, the rollbacks, the save points, the roll-locks. This doesn't disappear with LowCode. All of that stuff is still there. You need to understand all of this stuff. So I think that these are kind of examples to give you a little bit of a flavor of what I consider hard stuff and when you need to engage that sort of professional developer. And I think the key takeaway here is that it's quick to get to these things. And that's good, because we want our developers to focus on this stuff. We don't want them to focus on building another pop-up. Okay, a little bit to make it work, a little bit of a summary. Stay with standard blocks unless value add from custom. This is a little bit back to those initial Lego bits. Stay with initial Lego bits as long as you can. Back to my example with the 138 points versus 0 points. That's the extreme case, 138 versus 0. Reality is more like a visit to IKEA. It's just 5 kronas of candles. And then you get to the checkout point, you still spend 5,000 kronas, even though you're just going to go there and pick up some extra knives or whatever it was. It adds up quickly for all of those small little tweaks that you do to those standard components. So to really get leverage of the Mendix and the low-code environment, stay in those standard blocks as long as you can. Been talking about this, engage the professional developers for the hard stuff. And I think main point here is that you want them to work on the hard stuff. And also I think that's where the real developers think it's fun to be. They want to have those hard thing challenges. How can we make this up to date? How can we guarantee that transaction control? Learn the tool and stay with best practice. Might be an obvious one, but I think especially if you have sort of professional developers coming from not a tool or a traditional coding background, they are quite often used to working in a certain way, or solving things, I should say, in a certain way. And that might no longer be true. And it's a bit back to the building blocks. The second you start stepping out, it can be good reasons to step out of the best practice, but make sure that they are conscious decisions to stay out of the best practice. Final one here at the end is a standard web application. I think it's a bit kind of comforting to know this is a standard web application in the end. We can always become a little bit complacent because, Mendix handles the database, version control, that is all happening, but you need to understand what that actually means and all that entails in operating and running that web application. And I think the gap is potentially bigger because you can do so much without having deep skills, that when you need the deep skills, it's quite a big step. So like those semi-junior developers, they need to get up here quite quickly, because down here they have the competition from the business developers. They need to get up here and really understand sort of the deep technical levels of working with it. All right, a little bit sort of punching above our weight class with the help of Mendix. I didn't mention it initially, but we are a team today of 7 people. We deliver a SaaS application to a global base of clients. This we do thanks a lot to Mendix. With a small team, so it's full stack and cross-platform. This kind of a small company, I cannot have a dedicated Android developer. If I had, I would have to have hire someone in for 6 months and then to build that and then come back a year later when I want to do a change. So is very, again, back to that ease of managing the small team. Everyone can work cross-platform and full stack. I don't have database developers, and it's a much smaller sort of skill set to maintain within the team. Enterprise grade, very broad word, but we rely heavily on the story of Mendix, on the story of AWS when it comes to compliance, the certifications. We would not be able to have all of those badges ourselves, but we do tell the story about Mendix, and AWS, and gotta admit, everyone asks, "Oh, where are you hosted?" "Oh, AWS." "Okay, fine. Next question." That's often how that sort of conversation goes with most clients when it comes to that. It is a big stamp of approval. AWS is a little bit more known, to be honest, than Mendix. We have to do a little bit more explanation there, but it does help a lot. And final point there, the scalability on tap. I don't have a DevOps team. I don't have anyone thinking about sort of the next big server we're going to go and buy. And I know that, the day I need, I can just go and place an order and say, well, I want full redundancy, I want full fallback, all of the bells and whistles that are required. And that's just there the day I need it. I could give a lot of these examples, but I think it all comes down to simplicity and, for us to be able to focus on developing our product and our clients. I could talk a lot more here, but I thought we'll open up for some Q&A questions, if there are any. How we train the team? Yeah. So our team consists of, we have 2 really senior developers that have seen a lot of different projects, and then we have a semi-senior developer and a junior developer. And this is nothing that is related to LowCode. It's whatever tool you are working in, but it's about pairing them on different projects, making sure that they see different parts of the platform, get exposure to different technologies, and continuously sort of exchange ideas and thoughts on how to build things. But of course, we also try to get set standards on what we consider best practice and use the best practice from Mendix.
Good. Anything else? If not, I would say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.